The neon lights of Las Vegas painted Sofia Martinez's tired face in electric blues and reds as she pulled down the security gate of Bella's boutique on the Strip. At 22, she'd been working double shifts for 3 months, saving every penny for her mother's medical bills back in Phoenix. The October night was still warm, tourists flooding the sidewalks with their dreams and desperation. "Another 14-hour day," she whispered, her delicate fingers fumbling with the old lock. Her long dark hair caught the casino lights as she finally secured the gate. That's when she heard the footsteps behind her. Well, what do we have here?" The voice was rough, predatory. Sofia's heart stopped as she turned to see 3 men approaching from the shadows between buildings. The leader, a thin guy with greasy hair and gold teeth, smiled like a shark. "Pretty little thing working late, ain't you?" "The store's closed," Sofia managed, backing against the gate. Her voice trembled despite her attempt to sound strong. "We ain't here for shopping, sweetheart." The second man, broader with tattooed arms, stepped closer. "We're here for entertainment. You look like fun." Sofia's breath caught in her throat. The third man, younger but with dead eyes, blocked her path to the main street. Panic flooded her system as she realized how isolated this section of the Strip was at night. "Please, I just want to go home," she whispered. "Oh, you will," Goldteeth laughed, "but not yet." That's when the shadows moved. A figure emerged from the recessed doorway of the closed jewelry store next door. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive black suit that screamed power and money. The man's dark hair was perfectly styled, his face angular and handsome in a dangerous way. But it was his eyes, steel blue and absolutely cold, that made the 3 thugs freeze. "Gentlemen," the stranger said, his voice smooth as whiskey, but carrying an undertone that promised violence. "I believe the lady asked you to leave." Pedro Castellano had been conducting business in the jewelry store's back room when he heard the commotion. At 42, he was one of the most feared men in Las Vegas. Not that Sofia knew that. All she saw was salvation in a perfectly tailored suit. "This ain't your business, old man," Tattoo Arm snarled, but something in Pedro's presence made him hesitate. Pedro smiled, and somehow that was more terrifying than anger. "Actually, it became my business the moment you decided to terrorize this young woman on my street." He stepped closer, and the temperature seemed to drop. "Now you have exactly 10 seconds to disappear before I make you disappear permanently." "You threatening us?" Goldteeth tried to sound tough, but his voice cracked. "No," Pedro said, adjusting his platinum cufflinks with deliberate precision. "I'm promising you." The 3 men looked at each other, suddenly uncertain. Something about this stranger radiated danger, the kind of danger that came from never making empty threats. They were street thugs, but they weren't stupid enough to ignore survival instincts. "This ain't over," Goldteeth muttered, backing away. "Oh, but it is," Pedro replied. "And if I ever see you within 10 blocks of this location again, they'll need dental records to identify you." The men scattered into the night like cockroaches when the lights come on. Sofia stood pressed against the security gate, her whole body shaking. The mysterious stranger turned to her, and she was startled to see genuine concern replace the cold fury in his eyes. "Are you hurt?" His voice was different now, gentler though still carrying that hint of authority. "No, thank you." Sofia's voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." "But I did," Pedro interrupted softly. "That's what matters." He studied her face in the neon glow, struck by her natural beauty even in distress. "You shouldn't be walking alone out here this late. Vegas can be dangerous for someone like you." "Someone like me?" Sofia found her voice, a flash of spirit breaking through her fear. Pedro almost smiled. "Someone beautiful and innocent. This city eats people alive." Heat rose in Sofia's cheeks. "I can take care of myself, usually." "I'm sure you can." This time Pedro did smile, and Sofia felt her knees go weak. "But everyone needs backup sometimes. I'm Pedro." "Sofia." She accepted his offered hand, surprised by how warm and strong it was. Do you work around here?" "You could say that." Pedro's smile turned mysterious. "Can I drive you home? It's not safe for you to be alone after what just happened." Every sensible part of Sofia's brain screamed that accepting rides from strangers was dangerous. But looking into Pedro's blue eyes, she felt safer than she had all night. "Okay," she whispered. As Pedro led her to a sleek black Maserati parked nearby, neither of them noticed the figure watching from across the street. Vincent Torino, the youngest son of Don Angelo Torino, Pedro's biggest rival, pulled out his phone with shaking hands. "Papa," he whispered into the device. "We got a problem. That bastard Castellano just beat up 3 of our guys. And he's got himself a little girlfriend now." The night had just become far more complicated than either Pedro or Sofia could imagine. 3 days later, Sofia couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious man who'd saved her. Pedro had driven her home to her small apartment near downtown, been a perfect gentleman, and simply said, "Until next time," with that devastating smile before disappearing into the night. She'd replayed every moment 100 times while stocking shelves at Bella's boutique, wondering if she'd imagined the electricity between them. Friday evening, as Sofia prepared to close the store, she spotted a familiar figure across the street. Pedro leaned against the same jewelry store, watching her with those intense blue eyes. Her heart began racing as she waved. He crossed the street with the fluid confidence of a man who owned the world. "Working late again?" Pedro asked as she locked up. Tonight he wore charcoal grey slacks and a white dress shirt that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Just until 7 tonight," Sofia replied, suddenly self-conscious about her simple sundress and flat shoes. Much safer with the crowds around. Smart girl. Pedro's approval warmed her more than it should have. "Have dinner with me." It wasn't a question, but something in his tone made it feel like the most important choice in the world. "I don't even know your last name," Sofia protested weakly. "Castellano. Pedro Castellano." The name hung in the air between them. "And I know yours is Martinez. You're 22. You live on Paradise Road, and you send most of your paycheck to Phoenix for your mother's cancer treatments." Sofia's eyes widened. "How do you—" "I make it my business to know about people I'm interested in." Pedro stepped closer, and Sofia caught his scent. Expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely masculine. "Are you interested, Sofia?" The way he said her name with that slight rasp in his voice made her forget every reasonable objection. "Yes," she breathed. 30 minutes later, Sofia found herself in the most exclusive restaurant in Las Vegas, where Pedro was apparently known and feared in equal measure. The maitre d' nearly bowed when they arrived. Servers moved with nervous efficiency, and every detail was perfection. "This is incredible," Sofia whispered, looking around at the crystal chandeliers and artistic plating of their appetizers. "I've never been anywhere like this. The first of many new experiences. I hope." Pedro watched her with genuine pleasure as she tasted the wine he'd selected. "Tell me about Phoenix. About your mother." For the next hour, Sofia found herself opening up to this enigmatic man in ways she never had with anyone. Pedro listened with complete attention, asking thoughtful questions, making her laugh with dry wit and surprising gentleness. "She was diagnosed 8 months ago," Sofia explained, her voice catching slightly. "Breast cancer, stage 3. The treatments are experimental, not covered by insurance." "That's why you're working 2 jobs and living on ramen noodles," Pedro observed quietly. Sofia blushed. "You really did investigate me." "I told you, I'm interested." Pedro reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The contact sent electricity shooting up her arm. "What if money wasn't an obstacle? What would you want to do with your life?" Sofia stared at their joined hands. "I wanted to be a teacher. Elementary school. I love kids and I think I could make a difference. You could still do that." "With what time? What money?" Sofia tried to pull her hand away, but Pedro held on gently. "This is just fantasy talk. My reality is working retail until my mother gets better or what? Or doesn't." The words hung heavy between them. Pedro was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "What if I told you there was another way?" "What do you mean?" Before Pedro could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Excuse me one moment." He answered the call, his voice dropping to a tone Sofia couldn't quite hear. But she caught fragments. "Don't care what his father thinks. Make it clear, so touch her and you're dead." When Pedro hung up, his expression had shifted back to the charming man she'd been talking to, but Sofia sensed steel beneath the surface. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Business call, nothing that can't wait." Pedro signaled for the check, which appeared instantly. "I should get you home." The drive back to her apartment was quieter, tension humming between them. When Pedro walked her to her door, Sofia turned to face him on the small landing. "Thank you for tonight. It was magical." "It doesn't have to end here," Pedro said softly, stepping closer. "I meant what I said about money not being an obstacle. I could help with your mother's treatment." Sofia's breath caught. "I couldn't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering." Pedro cupped her face gently. All I want in return is a real chance to see where this goes between us. Before Sofia could process what that meant, Pedro leaned down and kissed her. Soft at first, then deeper when she melted against him. When they finally broke apart, Sofia felt dizzy. Think about it, Pedro whispered against her lips. I'll call you tomorrow. As he walked away, Sofia touched her lips, still tingling from his kiss. She had no idea that 3 blocks away, Vincent Torino was uploading photos of their dinner to a secure server, or that Don Angelo Torino was already planning his response to Pedro Castellano's latest weakness. The game had begun, and Sofia was now a piece on the board whether she knew it or not. 3. Sofia barely slept that night, replaying Pedro's kiss and his mysterious offer over and over. By morning, she'd decided she needed answers about the man who'd swept into her life like a hurricane. She spent her Saturday shift at the boutique, researching Pedro Castellano on her phone between customers. What she found made her blood run cold. Pedro the architect Castellano, alleged head of the Castellano crime family. Federal investigation into money laundering operations, linked to multiple unsolved disappearances. One of the most powerful crime bosses on the West Coast. Her hands shook as she read article after article. The man who'd kissed her so tenderly was apparently one of the most dangerous men in America. When her shift ended at 6, Sofia was surprised to find Pedro waiting by the same jewelry store again. Seeing him now, knowing what she knew, made everything different. The expensive clothes, the way people had acted at the restaurant, his casual mention of making problems disappear, it all made horrible sense. You look like you've seen a ghost, Pedro observed as she approached. His blue eyes were sharp, missing nothing. I looked you up, Sofia said quietly. I know who you are, what you are. Pedro went very still. And what am I? Sofia? A criminal, a killer. The words felt like glass in her throat. Everything I read said, everything you read was written by people who don't know me, Pedro interrupted, his voice calm, but with an edge of steel. The newspapers love their stories, but they don't understand the reality of power in this city. So you're not a mob boss? Sofia challenged. Pedro smiled, but it wasn't entirely pleasant. I prefer businessman with diverse interests. But semantics aside, yes. I run certain operations in Las Vegas that the federal government frowns upon. Sofia felt the world tilt. You just admitted to being a criminal. I admitted to being practical. Pedro stepped closer, and despite everything, Sofia felt that familiar pull toward him. This city runs on money, power, and controlled chaos. I provide structure, order, protection for people who need it, and punishment for those who prey on the innocent. Like what you did to those men who bothered me. Exactly like that. Pedro's eyes heated. Those men were part of a rival organization that's been pushing drugs to teenagers and trafficking young women. I didn't just save you that night, Sofia. I eliminated a problem that's been festering in my territory. Your territory, Sofia's voice rose. You talk like you own the city. Parts of it, Pedro said matter-of-factly. The parts that matter. Sofia stared at him. This beautiful, dangerous man who spoke of violence and territory with the same casual tone others used for weather. I can't. This is insane. I can't be involved with someone like you. Something flickered in Pedro's eyes. Hurt, maybe, though it was gone so quickly Sofia might have imagined it. You think I'm a monster, he said quietly. I think you're terrifying, Sofia whispered, and I think I'm falling for you anyway, which makes me an idiot. The admission hung between them like a live wire. Pedro's expression softened completely. You're not an idiot. You're brave and honest and everything good in this corrupt world. He reached for her hand. And despite everything, Sofia let him take it. I've done things that would horrify you. I've made choices that keep me awake at night. But everything I've built, every decision I make, it's to protect what matters to me and what matters to you. Until 3 days ago, power, control, survival. Pedro brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. Now, you matter, more than anything. Sofia felt tears prick her eyes. This is crazy. We barely know each other. I know you work yourself to exhaustion for your mother. I know you turn down tips from customers who can't afford them. I know you volunteer at the children's hospital on Sundays, even though you're dead tired. Pedro's thumb traced across her knuckles. I know you're the best person I've ever met, and I'm probably going to corrupt you just by being near you. Pedro. Sofia's resolve was crumbling. Have dinner with me again. Ask me anything you want to know. Let me show you that I'm more than the newspapers say." Before Sophia could answer, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and saw her mother's number. "Mom," Sophia answered quickly. "Is everything okay?" "Sophia, baby." Her mother's voice was weak, strained. "The doctors want to start the new treatment next week, but insurance is refusing to cover it. We're talking about almost $50,000. Sophia felt the world drop out from under her. "Mom, we'll figure something out. We always do." "How, baby? We've already borrowed against the house. I'm thinking maybe it's time to just—" "No," Sophia's voice cracked. "Don't you dare give up. I'll find the money somehow, I promise." After a few more minutes of reassurance, she didn't feel. Sophia hung up and realized Pedro had heard every word. "Let me help," he said simply. "I can't take money from you. Not when I know how you make it. My money spends the same as anyone else's. Your mother needs treatment, and I can provide it. Tonight." Sophia stared at him, torn between desperation and principle. "And what would you want in return?" "Time. A real chance for us." Pedro's voice was gentle but determined. "I'm not asking you to marry me, Sophia. I'm asking you to let me prove that what we have is worth fighting for." Across the street, Vincent Torino lowered his binoculars and smiled coldly. The girl was Castellano's weakness now, which made her very valuable indeed. All he had to do was wait for the right moment to take her away from his father's enemy. But first, he'd let them get a little more attached. The deeper Castellano fell, the more it would hurt when Vincent destroyed everything the bastard cared about. Sophia looked into Pedro's eyes and saw sincerity beneath the danger. Her mother was dying, and here was a man offering salvation, at the cost of her soul maybe, but salvation nonetheless. "Okay," she whispered. "Help her, and I'll try to give us a chance." Pedro smiled, and for the first time in his adult life, he felt something more powerful than revenge or ambition. He felt love beginning to bloom in the darkness of his world. 2 weeks later, Sophia's world had changed completely. Pedro had made one phone call, and suddenly her mother was in the best cancer treatment facility in Arizona, with round-the-clock care. The doctors were optimistic. The insurance issues had mysteriously vanished, and her mother was getting stronger every day. Sophia knew she should feel guilty about where the money came from, but watching her mother laugh again during their video calls made it impossible to regret. She was also spending every evening with Pedro, who was showing her a side of Las Vegas she'd never imagined. Private restaurants where they never needed reservations, exclusive shows where seats materialized in sold-out venues, quiet moments on his penthouse balcony overlooking the entire strip. Tonight, Pedro had taken her to his private office above one of his legitimate businesses, an upscale nightclub called Nero's. The space was all dark wood and leather, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the city. "This is incredible," Sophia said, running her fingers along the edge of his massive mahogany desk. "You really run all this?" "This and several other operations." Pedro poured 2 glasses of wine from a bottle that probably cost more than her monthly salary. "The club, 3 restaurants, a construction company, and some import-export businesses. All legitimate?" Sophia asked with a raised eyebrow. Pedro's smile was mysterious. "The ones I just mentioned are." Sophia shook her head, still amazed by the casual way he talked about his double life. "Don't you worry about getting caught?" "I worry about protecting the people I care about," Pedro said, moving closer to her. "Everything else is just risk management." Over the past 2 weeks, Sophia had learned that Pedro was far more complex than the newspapers suggested. Yes, he was dangerous. She'd seen the way people deferred to him, the way conversations stopped when he entered rooms. But he was also generous, thoughtful and surprisingly gentle with her. "How did you get into all this?" Sophia asked, accepting the wine. "You don't seem like someone who grew up wanting to be a crime boss." Pedro was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the lights of his city. "My father ran a small construction business. It's honest work, but we struggled. When I was 15, some men came to collect on a debt he couldn't pay. They burned down his shop with him inside." Sophia's hand flew to her mouth. "Pedro." The police said they'd investigate, but everyone knew who was really responsible. Angelo Torino's father controlled the construction unions back then. "My dad had refused to pay their protection fees." Pedro's voice was calm, but Sophia saw the old pain in his eyes. "I realized that night that honest work wasn't enough in this world. You need power to protect what you love. So you decided to become powerful." "I decided to become untouchable." Pedro turned back to her, his blue eyes intense. I started small. Collections, numbers running, some strong-arm work. Built a reputation. Gathered loyal people. By the time I was 25, I was running half the operations the Torinos thought they controlled. And now? Now, Angelo Torino and I exist in a careful balance. We each control different territories, different business interests. As long as nobody crosses certain lines, we maintain peace. Sophia sipped her wine, processing this glimpse into Pedro's past. Is that why you were so angry that night? When those men bothered me, they were crossing a line. They were in my territory harassing an innocent woman. But more than that, Pedro set down his glass and moved to stand directly in front of her. They were threatening something that belonged to me. Belonged to you? Sophia's pulse quickened. From the moment I saw you that night, Sophia, you were mine. Pedro cupped her face in his hands. I know that probably sounds possessive and archaic, but I can't change how I feel. You're mine to protect, mine to care for, mine to love. The word love hung between them like a bridge neither had dared cross before. Pedro. Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. I love you, he said simply. I know it's been only 2 weeks. I know you probably think I'm moving too fast, but I've never felt anything like this before. You make me want to be better than what I am. Sophia felt tears prick her eyes. I love you too. God help me, but I do. Pedro kissed her then, deep and desperate, and Sophia melted into him completely. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Stay with me tonight, Pedro whispered against her lips. Not just tonight. Move in with me, let me take care of you properly. Pedro, I can't just... Why not? You're already mine. I'm already yours. The rest is just paperwork. Sophia laughed despite the intensity of the moment. That's not how relationships work for normal people. We're not normal people, Pedro pointed out. I'm a crime boss, and you're the woman brave enough to love me anyway. Normal doesn't apply to us. Before Sophia could respond, Pedro's phone buzzed urgently. He ignored it the first time, but when it buzzed again immediately, his expression darkened. I have to take this, he said apologetically, moving away to answer. Sophia couldn't hear the conversation, but she watched Pedro's body language change. His shoulders tensed, his free hand clenched into a fist, and when he hung up, his face was stone cold. What's wrong? Sophia asked. Nothing you need to worry about. Pedro's voice was different now, the voice of the dangerous man she'd read about. But I need to take you home now. Pedro, what happened? He was already moving, gathering his jacket and keys with swift efficiency. Some business that can't wait. I'll explain later. As they rode the elevator down to his car, Sophia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Whatever that phone call had been about, it had transformed her gentle lover back into the predator she knew lurked beneath the surface. What Sophia didn't know was that Vincent Torino had just made his first move in a game that would test everything Pedro had built, including his love for her. The war was coming, and Sophia was about to discover that loving a man like Pedro Castellano meant sharing his enemies as well as his heart. 5. Sophia woke up the next morning in her own apartment, alone and worried. Pedro had been tense and distant during the drive home, promising to call her later, but offering no explanation for the sudden change in his mood. She spent her Sunday shift at the boutique distracted, checking her phone every few minutes. Pedro always called by noon when he said he would, but it was now past 3 o'clock with no word. When the store's landline rang, Sophia answered absently. Bella's boutique, how can I help you? Is this Sophia Martinez? The voice was unfamiliar, with a slight Italian accent. Yes, who's calling? My name is Vincent Torino. I believe you know my business associate, Pedro Castellano. Sophia's blood turned to ice. Even she, new to this world, recognized the Torino name. I'm sorry. I don't know what you're talking about. Please, Miss Martinez. Let's not play games. I have something that belongs to your boyfriend, and I'd like to arrange a trade. What are you talking about? Sophia's voice was shaking now. 3 of my father's men went missing last night. The same 3 men who had that unfortunate encounter with you and Pedro 2 weeks ago. Funny coincidence, don't you think? Sophia's mind raced. Pedro had been strange after that phone call. I don't know anything about missing men. Of course you don't. You're just the innocent little girlfriend. Vincent's voice turned ugly. But innocence doesn't protect you in this business. Sweetheart, Pedro should have taught you that by now. What do you want? Meet me tonight. 10 o'clock. The parking garage beneath the Palladium Hotel. Come alone, and maybe we can resolve this without anyone getting hurt. I'm not meeting you anywhere. Then let me be more persuasive. There was a pause, and Sophia heard muffled sounds like someone moving. Pedro, say hello to your little girlfriend. Sophia's heart stopped as Pedro's voice came through the phone, strained, angry, but unmistakably his. Sophia, whatever he tells you, don't do it. Don't come anywhere near. The line went dead. Sophia stared at the phone, her whole body shaking. Pedro was in trouble. Vincent Torino had him, and somehow she was the key to whatever twisted game was being played. She tried calling Pedro's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. His business line was disconnected. Every number she had for him was either dead or busy. By 8 o'clock, Sophia had made her decision. She couldn't go to the police, and what would she tell them? That her Mafia boss boyfriend had been kidnapped by a rival crime family? She'd probably end up arrested herself. But she couldn't just abandon Pedro either. Whatever he was, whatever he'd done, she loved him, and she was apparently the only person who could help him. At 9:30, Sophia arrived at the Palladium Hotel parking garage. The place was nearly empty, full of shadows and blind corners that made her skin crawl. She'd hidden a small knife in her purse. Not much protection, but it made her feel slightly less helpless. Vincent Torino was waiting by a black SUV on the 3rd level. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 30, with dark hair and cold eyes that reminded her uncomfortably of Pedro. But where Pedro had warmth beneath the danger, Vincent radiated nothing but cruelty. "Miss Martinez, so good of you to join me." Vincent smiled, and Sophia felt sick. "You're even prettier than the photos suggest." "Where is Pedro?" Sophia demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Safe, for now." Vincent gestured to the SUV. "He's very worried about you, you know. Keeps saying you shouldn't be involved in this. That you're innocent." "I am innocent." "Are you?" Vincent circled her slowly, like a shark scenting blood. "You're sleeping with one of the most dangerous men in Nevada. You're living off money made from drugs, prostitution, and murder. How innocent does that make you?" Sophia flinched. "Pedro isn't like that. He protects people." Vincent laughed, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. "Is that what he told you, that he's some kind of hero?" He pulled out his phone and showed her a series of photos. "This is what your hero did to my men last night." Sophia glimpsed images of violence before turning away, but not before seeing enough to understand. "You said they were missing." "Missing? Dead? Same thing in this business." Vincent put the phone away. "Pedro found out they were part of the crew that bothered you, so he decided to send my father a message. 3 bodies, very messily disposed of. They were trying to hurt me," Sophia whispered. "So? That's what men like us do. We take what we want." Vincent moved closer, and Sophia smelled expensive cologne, mixed with something that made her think of graveyards. The difference is, Pedro pretends to be better than he is. He tells you pretty lies about protection and love. I'm honest about what I am. "What do you want?" Sophia repeated. "Originally, I wanted to use you to hurt Pedro. Take you away, make him suffer. Maybe ransom you back piece by piece." Vincent's smile was the stuff of nightmares. "But seeing you now, I think I want to keep you for myself." Sophia's hand moved toward her purse, but Vincent was faster. He grabbed her wrist in a grip that made her bones ache. Now, no weapons between friends." He twisted her arm until she cried out and dropped the purse. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with me quietly. We're going to drive somewhere private. And you're going to help me send Pedro a very special message about what happens when someone kills my men. I won't help you hurt him." "Oh, sweetheart, you won't have a choice." Vincent was pulling her toward the SUV when the lights went out. The parking garage plunged into absolute darkness, and Sophia heard Vincent curse in Italian. Then there were sounds, footsteps, harsh whispers, the distinctive click of guns being cocked. "Vincent!" Pedro's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. "Let her go, and maybe I'll kill you quickly." Suddenly, Sophia was pressed against Vincent's chest, his arm around her throat and something cold and metallic against her temple. "I don't think so, Castellano," Vincent called back. "How did you find us?" "You always were sloppy." "Kid, tracking devices are wonderful things." Pedro's voice was getting closer. "Release Sophia, and we can settle this between us. She's not going anywhere, and neither are you." The lights came back on suddenly, revealing Pedro and 6 armed men surrounding them. Pedro looked terrible. His expensive shirt was torn and bloody. His face was bruised, but his eyes burned with fury that made Sophia's knees weak. "Last chance, Vincent," Pedro said quietly. Vincent's gun pressed harder against Sophia's head. "Shoot me, and she dies too. Hurt her, and what I do to you will make what happened to your men look like mercy." Sophia realized she was holding her breath. Around them, 12 men with guns faced off in a standstill that could end in bloodshed at any second. Then she remembered something Pedro had taught her. Sometimes the best defense is an unexpected offense. Sophia drove her elbow back into Vincent's ribs as hard as she could while dropping to her knees. Vincent's shot went wide, and before he could recover, Pedro was on him like a hurricane. The fight was brief and brutal. When it ended, Vincent was unconscious and bleeding on the concrete, and Sophia was in Pedro's arms. "Are you hurt?" Pedro demanded, his hands running over her frantically. "Did he touch you?" "I swear to God if he—" "I'm okay," Sophia whispered, clinging to him. "I'm okay, but Pedro, what he said about those men—" Pedro went very still. "What did he tell you? That you killed them? That you had them murdered because of what they did to me?" Pedro looked into her eyes for a long moment. "Yes," he said simply. "I did." Sophia felt the world shift again. "Pedro, they hurt you. They threatened you. They would have come back for you eventually." Pedro's voice was steady, unapologetic. "I eliminated the threat. I'd do it again." Sophia stared at the man she loved, seeing clearly for the first time exactly what loving him meant. He would kill for her, had killed for her, and somehow that both terrified and thrilled her. "This is who I am, Sophia," Pedro said quietly. "This is the world you're choosing. If you can't handle it, tell me now, and I'll have you relocated somewhere safe. New identity, new life far away from all this." Sophia looked around the garage, at the unconscious man who'd threatened to torture her, at the armed men awaiting Pedro's orders, at the blood and violence that was apparently her new reality. Then she looked back at Pedro and saw the love and fear warring in his blue eyes. "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly. "But we need to talk. About everything. No more secrets." Pedro smiled. And despite everything, Sophia felt her heart flutter. "No more secrets," he agreed. "But first, let me clean up this mess." As Pedro's men secured Vincent and began coordinating cleanup, Sophia realized her old life was officially over. She was part of Pedro's world now, for better or worse, and despite everything, she'd never felt more alive. 6. 1 month later, Sophia had moved into Pedro's penthouse and learned more about his empire than she'd ever wanted to know. He kept his word about no more secrets, showing her financial records, explaining his various business operations, and introducing her to his key lieutenants. The legitimate businesses were actually quite impressive. The restaurants were profitable, the construction company had contracts throughout Nevada, and the nightclub was one of the most successful in Vegas. But Sophia also learned about the loan sharking, the money laundering, and the protection rackets that funded their lifestyle. "The way I see it," Pedro explained over breakfast on a crisp November morning, "every major city has crime. The question is whether it's organized and controlled or random and chaotic. I provide organization." "You make it sound like a public service," Sophia said, sipping her coffee. Their morning routine had become precious to her, these quiet moments before Pedro disappeared into his dangerous world. "In some ways it is. The teenagers buying drugs in my territory get clean product and aren't recruited as dealers. The working girls have protection and medical care. Small business owners pay reasonable fees for real security." Pedro reached across their dining table to take her hand. "I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's better than chaos." Sophia was learning to live with these moral ambiguities. The money paying for her mother's cancer treatment came from illegal sources, but her mother was getting better. Pedro was a criminal, but he'd also donated millions to children's hospitals and homeless shelters. "Vincent's been quiet since that night in the garage," Sophia observed. Pedro's expression darkened slightly. "Too quiet. Angelo's been keeping him on a short leash, but I don't trust it. The kid has a taste for revenge now. What happens if he tries something again? Then I finish what I should have finished that night." Pedro's voice carried that edge of steel Sophia had learned to recognize. "I was merciful because you were there. Next time I won't be." Before Sophia could respond, Pedro's phone rang. He answered with his usual crisp efficiency. "Castellano." "What? When?" "No, don't move anything. I'm on my way." Pedro hung up, his face grim. "I have to go. There's been a problem at the construction site." "What kind of problem?" The kind that involves federal agents and search warrants. Pedro was already moving, grabbing his jacket and keys. I'll be back as soon as I can. Don't leave the penthouse today. Pedro, is this serious? He paused at the door, looking back at her with an expression that made her stomach clench. It could be. If something happens, if I don't come back by tonight, there's a bag in the bedroom safe with cash and new identification papers. Tommy knows the plan. What plan, Pedro? You're scaring me. The plan where you disappear and live a long, happy life somewhere far away from all this. Pedro came back to her, cupping her face in his hands. I love you, Sophia, more than I've ever loved anything, but I won't let my world destroy you. Nothing's going to happen, Sophia said firmly. You're too smart to get caught by federal agents. Pedro smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We'll see. After he left, Sophia tried to distract herself with a book, but anxiety gnawed at her. She'd grown used to the constant low-level danger of Pedro's world, but this felt different, more serious. Around noon, the penthouse landline rang. Sophia answered cautiously, knowing Pedro preferred she not take calls when he wasn't there. Sophia, thank God. It was her mother's voice, shaky and excited. Mom, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong, baby. Everything's wonderful. The doctors just told me the tumors are shrinking faster than they hoped. They think I could be in full remission within 6 months. Sophia felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. Mom, that's incredible. That's the best news I've heard in forever. I know we didn't talk about how you managed to get me into this program, and I know it must have cost a fortune. Her mother's voice was careful. I just want you to know that whatever you had to do, whoever you had to ask for help, I'm grateful. You saved my life. I'd do anything for you, Mom. You know that. They talked for another 20 minutes, and by the time Sophia hung up, she was crying happy tears. Her mother was going to live. Whatever moral compromises she'd made, whatever dangers she'd accepted, it had been worth it. That afternoon, Sophia received a visitor. Tommy, Pedro's most trusted lieutenant, arrived at the penthouse with an expression that made her blood run cold. Mrs. Castellano, he began formally, we're not married. Tommy, you know that. As far as the organization is concerned, you are. Tommy was a small, neat man in his 50s who'd been with Pedro for over a decade. We need to talk. Is it Pedro? Is he in trouble? He's been arrested. Federal charges, racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy. Tommy's voice was steady, but Sophia could see the worry in his eyes. His lawyer thinks they have a strong case. Sophia felt the room spin. How long? What does this mean? If convicted, he's looking at 20 to life. No parole. The words hit Sophia like physical blows. 20 to life. No parole. Pedro, gone forever. There's something else, Tommy continued. Angelo Torino is already moving to take over Pedro's territories. With Pedro locked up, there's nothing stopping him from claiming everything. What about you? What about the rest of the organization? We'll fight. But without Pedro, he was the one who kept everyone in line, the one who made the hard decisions. Tommy studied her face carefully. There is one option. What? You could take over? Sophia stared at him. That's insane. I don't know anything about running a criminal organization. You know more than you think. You've been watching Pedro for months, learning how he thinks, how he operates, and more importantly, you have something the others don't. What? Legitimacy. Pedro loved you openly. Everyone knows you were his choice, his weakness, his strength. If you stepped up, claimed leadership in his absence, Tommy shrugged. People would follow you. Would, at least long enough to keep the empire from falling apart. Sophia felt hysteria bubbling up in her chest. I can't be a crime boss, Tommy. I worked retail a month ago. Pedro started as a nobody too. Leadership isn't about experience. It's about making people believe you deserve to lead. Tommy leaned forward. Think about it. Your mother's treatment, the life you've built here, everything Pedro gave you, it all disappears if the organization falls apart. The government will seize his assets. The Torinos will come for anyone associated with him, including me, especially you. Vincent's been waiting for this chance. Sophia walked to the window. Looking out at the city Pedro had controlled just that morning, everything was falling apart so quickly. I need to see him, she said finally. I need to talk to Pedro. Visiting won't be possible for at least a week, maybe longer. Sophia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices. If I said yes to this insane idea, what would it involve? Emergency meeting tonight. Pedro's key people, the heads of the major operations. You walk in, announce that you're taking charge until Pedro is released, and dare anyone to challenge you. And if they do challenge me? Tommy's smile was sharp. Then we find out how much they really respected Pedro's judgment. Sophia turned back to face him. This is crazy. This is survival, Tommy corrected. The only question is whether you're brave enough to fight for what Pedro built, or whether you're going to let it all burn down while he's locked away. Sophia thought about her mother, healthy and happy because of Pedro's money. She thought about Pedro, sitting in a cell somewhere, probably wondering if everything he'd built would survive his absence. She thought about Vincent Torino and his promise to make her suffer. "When's the meeting?" she asked quietly. Tommy smiled. 9 o'clock. "I'll pick you up at 8:30. "Tommy, what if I can't do this? What if I'm not strong enough?" "Then we're all fucked," Tommy said bluntly. "But Pedro chose you for a reason. He saw something in you that made him risk everything. Maybe it's time you found out what that was." After Tommy left, Sophia sat in the quiet penthouse and tried to process the complete upheaval of her life. This morning she'd been a crime boss's girlfriend. Tonight, she might become a crime boss herself. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd fallen in love with Pedro, partly because he made her feel protected and safe. Now with him gone, she was being asked to become the protector. Sophia looked at herself in the mirror, seeing a young woman who still looked like she should be folding clothes in a boutique rather than commanding respect from hardened criminals. But beneath the surface she found something harder, something that had grown during her weeks in Pedro's world, something that wouldn't let her run away when the people she loved needed her most. Maybe Tommy was right. Maybe Pedro had seen something in her that she was only now discovering. Tonight, she'd find out if she was brave enough to claim it. The game was changing, and Sophia Martinez, the innocent retail worker from Phoenix, was about to discover what she was truly capable of when everything she loved was on the line. 7. At exactly 9 o'clock that evening, Sophia walked into the back room of Nero's nightclub, wearing a black designer dress Pedro had bought her, and every piece of confidence she could muster. The room fell silent as 12 of the most dangerous men in Las Vegas turned to stare at her. "Gentlemen," Sophia said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I'm sure you've all heard about Pedro's arrest by now." "We heard," growled Danny Ricci, Pedro's oldest lieutenant. "Question is, what the hell are you doing here?" "Sweetheart." Sophia felt the room's hostility like a physical force, but she'd learned from watching Pedro that showing weakness was fatal in this world. "I'm here because someone needs to keep this organization running while Pedro is gone," she replied coolly. "And that someone is me." The silence stretched for several heartbeats before Frank Moretti, who ran the protection rackets, started laughing. "You? You're a kid who was folding clothes 6 weeks ago. What makes you think you can run Pedro's empire?" "Because Pedro chose me," Sophia said simply. "Because I know every detail of his operations. And because I'm the only person in this room who gives a damn about getting him out of prison." "That's touching," Danny sneered. "But sentiment doesn't run a business. You don't know the first thing about the $12 million you've been skimming from the construction contracts," Sophia interrupted, her voice sharp. "About Frank's gambling problem that's cost us $300,000 this year. About the fact that half of you are more concerned with protecting your own territories than maintaining what Pedro built." The room went deadly quiet. Sophia had spent weeks learning Pedro's business, memorizing files, understanding the complex web of relationships and responsibilities. Now she was using that knowledge like a weapon. "Pedro kept detailed records on everyone," she continued. "Every operation, every weakness, every liability. Tommy, show them the files." Tommy placed a thick folder on the table, and Sophia saw several men shift uncomfortably. "Here's what's going to happen," Sophia announced. "I'm taking temporary control of all operations until Pedro is released. Anyone who has a problem with that can leave now and find new employment. Anyone who stays follows my orders without question. And if we don't?" Danny challenged. Sophia smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like Pedro when he was about to destroy someone. "Then you'll discover that I learned more from Pedro than just his business practices." "You threatening us? Little girl?" "I'm promising you," Sophia replied, echoing Pedro's words from that first night. "Cross me, and you'll find out exactly how much of Pedro rubbed off on me." The standoff lasted another full minute before Tommy spoke up. "I'm with Sophia. Pedro trusted her with everything that mattered to him. That's good enough for me." One by one, the others nodded their agreement. Not enthusiastic support, but pragmatic acceptance. In this world, that was often the best you could hope for. After the meeting, Sophia found herself alone with Tommy in Pedro's office. "That went better than expected," Tommy observed. "They'll test me within 48 hours, Sophia replied, pouring herself a drink with hands that only shook slightly. "Danny, especially. He thinks he should be running things." "Probably, but you handled yourself well. Pedro would be proud." Sophia stared out the window at the city lights. "I still can't believe this is real. Yesterday I was worried about making rent. Tonight I'm apparently running a criminal empire. The transition's always jarring," Tommy said gently, "but you've got good instincts. Trust them." The next morning brought the first test. Sophia arrived at the office to find Danny waiting with 2 of his men and a problem. "We got a situation," Danny announced without preamble. "The Torinos hit one of our betting parlors last night, took 20 grand, and beat up 3 of our guys." Sophia felt ice form in her stomach. "How bad?" "2 in the hospital, 1 with a broken arm. They left a message saying this was just the beginning." Sophia closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of 12 lives suddenly resting on her shoulders. "What would Pedro do?" "Hit them back twice as hard," Danny replied immediately. "Show them we're not weak just because he's locked up. And if we escalate, more people get hurt. If we don't escalate, we look weak. In this business, weak gets you killed." Sophia realized this was it, her first real decision as a leader. Whatever she chose would set the tone for everything that followed. "Set up a meeting," she said finally, "with Angelo Torino, just him and me." Danny stared at her. "That's suicide. Angelo doesn't negotiate with nobodies." "Then it's a good thing I'm not a nobody anymore," Sophia replied with more confidence than she felt. "I'm Pedro Castellano's woman, and that makes me somebody whether Angelo likes it or not." That afternoon, Sophia found herself in an upscale Italian restaurant owned by the Torinos, sitting across from Don Angelo Torino himself. The old man was exactly what central casting would order for a mob boss. Grey hair, expensive suit, dead eyes that had seen too much violence. "Miss Martinez," Angelo said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of authority, "I admit, I'm curious why Pedro Castellano's little girlfriend thinks she can request a meeting with me." "Because your son is making this personal when it should be business," Sophia replied evenly. "And because continuing this war will cost both our organizations more than either of us can afford." Angelo smiled, but it wasn't pleasant. "My son tells me you're quite the little spitfire, says you've got potential. Your son tried to kidnap and torture me. I'm not particularly interested in his opinion of my potential. Vincent can be enthusiastic, but he's right about one thing. You're not the innocent little shop girl anymore, are you?" Sophia met his gaze steadily. "No, I'm not." "Good. Innocence is a luxury none of us can afford." Angelo leaned back in his chair. "So, what are you proposing?" "A return to the previous territorial agreements. Your people stay out of our businesses, we stay out of yours. No more raids, no more violence. And in return, we don't retaliate for last night's attack. We pretend it never happened." Angelo was quiet for a long moment. "You know, 40 years ago, I might have been insulted that Pedro sent a woman to negotiate with me. But times change, and you've got more steel in your spine than most of the men I deal with. Is that a yes?" "It's a maybe, but there's one condition." Sophia waited. "Vincent wants another shot at you. Seems you wounded his pride that night in the garage. If I'm going to control my son, I need to give him something in return." "What kind of something?" Angelo's smile was predatory. "A fair fight. You and Vincent, neutral ground, no weapons, no backup. Winner takes all." Sophia felt her blood turn cold. "That's insane." "That's business. Vincent gets his satisfaction, and if you win, he'll respect the new arrangements. If you lose—" Angelo shrugged. "Well then, Pedro's empire dies with you, and we take everything anyway." Sophia realized she was trapped. Refuse, and the war escalated until everyone was dead. Accept, and she was probably dead anyway. "When?" she asked quietly. "Tomorrow night. The old Silverstein warehouse on Industrial Drive. Just you, Vincent, and witnesses from both sides." As Sophia left the restaurant, she wondered if she'd just signed her own death warrant. Vincent Torino was bigger, stronger, and had been trained to fight since childhood, but Sophia had something Vincent didn't have. Everything to lose and nothing left to fear. The next 24 hours would determine whether Pedro's empire survived, and whether Sophia would live to see him free again. 8. Sophia spent the next day preparing for what might be her last fight. She called her mother, careful not to reveal anything that might worry her, and was relieved to hear the continued good news about her treatment. She wrote a letter to Pedro, knowing he couldn't receive it yet, but needing to put her feelings into words. Tommy tried to talk her out of the fight, offering to send men to rescue her or to ignore Angelo's deal entirely. But Sophia understood something Tommy didn't. This wasn't just about territory or respect. This was about proving to herself and everyone else that she belonged in this world. "Here, if I run from this, I'll never be able to lead," she told Tommy as they drove to the warehouse that evening. "Everyone will know I'm just pretending to be strong. Pedro would never forgive me if something happens to you." "Pedro will understand that I did what I had to do," Sophia replied. "That's who he is. That's why I love him." The Silverstein warehouse was a massive industrial building on the outskirts of Vegas, empty except for some old machinery and 20 years of dust. When Sophia arrived, she found representatives from both organizations waiting in a rough circle, creating an impromptu arena. Vincent stood in the center, wearing jeans and a t-shirt that showed off his muscular build. He was bouncing on his feet like a boxer, grinning with anticipation. "Well, well," Vincent called out as Sophia approached. "The little princess actually showed up. I was sure you'd send some bodyguard to fight your battles." "I fight my own battles," Sophia replied, removing her jacket to reveal workout clothes and athletic shoes. She'd spent the afternoon at Pedro's private gym, remembering self-defense lessons he'd insisted on teaching her. "Any last words before I finish what we started?" Vincent taunted. Sophia looked around at the assembled men, criminals, killers, men who'd lived their entire lives by violence. A month ago, she would have been terrified to be in the same room with them. Now, she was about to fight their prince for the right to command their respect. "Just one thing," Sophia said quietly. "I'm not fighting you for Pedro's empire, I'm fighting you for my own." The words surprised even her with their truth. Somewhere in the past week, this had stopped being about preserving what Pedro built and started being about claiming what was hers. Vincent rushed her immediately, trying to end the fight with brute force. Sophia had expected this. He was angry, impatient, used to intimidating people into submission. She dodged his first swing and caught him in the ribs with her elbow, exactly as Pedro had taught her. Vincent grunted but barely slowed down. His next punch caught Sophia in the shoulder, spinning her around and reminding her painfully of the difference in their size and strength. For the next several minutes, Sophia focused on survival. Vincent was stronger and more experienced, but he was also sloppy. He expected an easy victory over a frightened girl, and Sophia used that arrogance against him. She stayed mobile, using the warehouse space to her advantage, making Vincent chase her while landing quick strikes whenever he overextended. It wasn't pretty fighting, but it was effective. "Stand still and fight, you coward," Vincent panted, his face red with exertion and embarrassment. "Make me," Sophia shot back, landing another quick jab to his kidney. That's when Vincent's temper finally snapped. He grabbed a piece of pipe from the old machinery, violating the agreed-upon rules about weapons. "Vincent!" Angelo's voice cracked like a whip. "Put it down!" But Vincent was beyond listening. He swung the pipe at Sophia's head with lethal intent. Sophia ducked, and the pipe smashed into a concrete pillar, sending vibrations up Vincent's arms. In that moment of his distraction, Sophia saw her opening. She grabbed a handful of dust from the floor and threw it in Vincent's face, blinding him temporarily. Then she delivered the hardest kick she could manage directly to his knee. Vincent screamed and went down hard, clutching his leg. The pipe clattered away across the concrete floor. Sophia stood over him, breathing hard, her clothes torn and dirty but victorious. "It's over," she announced to the watching men. "Vincent lost. The deal stands." Angelo Torino walked into the circle, looking down at his son with disgust. "Get up, Vincent. You've embarrassed our family enough for one night." "She cheated," Vincent snarled through his pain. "She used weapons." "You used a weapon first," Angelo replied coldly. She responded appropriately. He turned to Sophia with something that might have been respect. "You fight smart, not just hard. That's good. In this business, smart keeps you alive longer than strong. So we have an agreement. We have an agreement. The previous territorial arrangements are restored. No more raids, no more retaliation." Angelo's eyes hardened. "But understand something, Miss Martinez. This deal is between you and me. If Pedro ever gets out of prison, he and I will need to have our own conversation." Sophia nodded. "Understood." As the Torino men helped Vincent limp away, Tommy approached Sophia with admiration and concern warring in his expression. That was either very brave or very stupid, he observed. Maybe both, Sophia admitted, but it worked. The next morning, Sophia woke in Pedro's bed with every muscle in her body aching. She'd won the fight, secured peace with the Torinos, and proven her leadership to both organizations, but the cost was becoming clear. Looking at herself in the mirror, Sophia barely recognized the woman staring back. Her knuckles were bruised, her face showed the effects of Vincent's few successful hits, and her eyes held a hardness that hadn't been there a week ago. She was becoming someone new, someone harder, more dangerous, more willing to use violence to protect what mattered. Someone more like Pedro. The question was whether she could find her way back to who she used to be once this was over, or whether she even wanted to. 2 hours later, Tommy arrived with news that changed everything. Pedro's lawyer called, he announced without preamble. The federal case is falling apart. Key witness disappeared. Evidence is being ruled inadmissible. Pedro could be out within the month. Sophia felt her heart leap. Are you serious? Dead serious. But there's something else. The lawyer thinks someone on the inside is helping. Someone with serious federal connections who wants Pedro free. Who would do that? Tommy's expression was grim. Someone who needs Pedro for something bigger than what the FBI was investigating. Someone who's been playing a much longer game than any of us realized. Sophia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. What kind of game? The kind where people like Pedro are pieces on a board, not players. The kind where what we think is the whole picture is really just one small corner. As Sophia processed this information, she realized that everything she'd been through, the arrest, taking over the organization, the fight with Vincent, might have been orchestrated by forces she couldn't even see. Pedro was coming home, but to what? And who had been pulling the strings all along? The game was bigger than she'd imagined, and Sophia was about to discover that survival required understanding not just the rules, but who was really making them. 9. 3 weeks later, Sophia had settled into an uneasy routine of running Pedro's empire while waiting for his release. The Torino truce was holding, business was flowing smoothly, and she'd earned grudging respect from Pedro's lieutenants. But the news about federal manipulation gnawed at her constantly. That changed on a Tuesday morning when Tommy burst into her office with panic in his eyes. "We got a problem, a big one." Sophia looked up from financial reports, noting Tommy's pale complexion. "What kind of problem?" "FBI raided 3 of our businesses simultaneously this morning, but not random raids. They knew exactly where to look, what to find, who to arrest." Sophia's blood chilled. Someone's feeding them information. It gets worse. They found the backup financial records at the construction office. The ones only 5 people knew about. 5 people? You, me, Pedro, Danny, and Frank. Tommy's voice was grim. "One of us is working with the feds." Sophia stared at him, feeling the walls of trust she'd carefully built begin crumbling. "Are you sure?" "The timing's too perfect. They hit us right when we were getting comfortable, right when you'd proven your leadership. Someone wanted to destabilize everything we've built." Sophia's mind raced through possibilities. Danny had resented her from the beginning, but betraying Pedro seemed beneath even him. Frank was weak but loyal. Tommy himself had been Pedro's right hand for years. What did they take? Enough to build serious cases against half our operation. But Sophia, Tommy hesitated. "They also took the files on your mother's medical payments. Someone specifically directed them to that information." Sophia felt sick. "They're going after my mother." "No, they're going after you, using your mother's treatment as evidence of money laundering and racketeering. They're trying to prove you're not just Pedro's girlfriend. You're an active participant in the organization." Before Sophia could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. "Sophia Martinez." The voice was professional, female with a slight southern accent. "Who's asking?" "Special Agent Sarah Chen, FBI. I think we need to talk." Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. "I don't have anything to say to the FBI." "I think you do, especially about who's been feeding us information about Pedro Castellanos' operations. Meet me at the Venetian food court in 1 hour. Come alone and maybe we can both get what we want." The line went dead, leaving Sophia staring at the phone. "What did they want?" Tommy asked. "To meet. They say they know who the informant is." Sophia made a decision that surprised herself. "I'm going." "That's insane." "It's obviously a trap." "Maybe. But if there really is a mole, I need to know who it is before they destroy everything Pedro built." An hour later, Sophia sat in the crowded food court of the Venetian, feeling absurdly normal surrounded by tourists eating overpriced Chinese food. Agent Chen turned out to be a small, sharp-eyed woman in her 30s who looked like she could handle herself in any situation. "Miss Martinez, thank you for coming. Get to the point, Agent Chen. Who's the informant?" Chen smiled thinly. "Straight to business. I like that. But first, let me ask you something. Do you really think you're running Pedro Castellano's organization?" "What kind of question is that?" "The kind that might save your life. Tell me, who suggested you take over when Pedro was arrested?" Sophia felt a chill. "Tommy did. He said the organization needed leadership. And who's been guiding your decisions? Advising you on strategy? Making sure you knew exactly what to do and when to do it?" "Tommy," Sophia whispered, the pieces falling into horrible place. "Tommy Marconi has been feeding us information for 18 months. He's the reason we arrested Pedro. He's the reason we raided your businesses this morning. And he's the reason you're about to be charged as the head of a criminal enterprise." Sophia felt the world tilt around her. "That's impossible. Tommy's been Pedro's most trusted." "Tommy's been playing the longest game of all. See, Pedro was getting too powerful, too independent. Certain people needed him contained, but they also needed his organization to remain functional. Enter Tommy, the loyal lieutenant who could guide a naive girlfriend into taking over, making her the perfect fall guy." "What people? Who's really behind this?" Chen leaned forward. "That's where you can help us. Tommy's working for someone much bigger than the FBI. Someone who's been manipulating organized crime in this city for years. Help us bring them down and we can make your mother's medical bills disappear from our investigation." Sophia stared at the agent, understanding that she was trapped between betraying Tommy and watching her mother become collateral damage in a war she didn't understand. "What do you want me to do?" "Keep doing exactly what you're doing. Run the organization, make the decisions, act like you're in charge. But feed us information about who Tommy's really working for. Eventually, he'll lead us to the real power behind all this. And if I refuse, then tomorrow morning you'll be arrested for racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy. Your mother's medical payments will be evidence of your criminal activity. She'll lose her treatment and you'll spend the next 20 years in federal prison." Sophia felt tears of rage and frustration burning her eyes. "You're asking me to betray the man who's been protecting me. I'm asking you to betray the man who's been using you. There's a difference." That night, Sophia returned to the penthouse feeling more alone than she'd ever felt in her life. Tommy was waiting for her, concern written across his face. "How did it go? What did the FBI want?" Sophia looked at this man she'd trusted, this man who'd guided her through the most dangerous weeks of her life, and wondered how much of it had been real. "They wanted to recruit me as an informant," she said carefully. "I told them to go to hell." Tommy's relief seemed genuine. "Good. They're just fishing, trying to divide us. Did they say anything about the raids?" "Just that they're building cases against everyone in the organization. We'll weather it. Pedro will be out soon, and once he's back, we can deal with whoever's been leaking information." Sophia nodded, playing her part while her mind raced. Was Tommy really a federal informant? If so, how deep did his deception go, and who was he really working for? "Tommy," she said carefully, "what happens if Pedro doesn't get out? What's the long-term plan for the organization?" "We survive, we adapt, we make sure his legacy continues." Tommy's voice was steady, but Sophia caught something else in his expression. "Why do you ask?" "Because I need to know if you're really committed to this, or if you're playing a deeper game." For just a moment, Tommy's mask slipped, and Sophia saw something cold and calculating in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by hurt and confusion. "Sophia, I've been loyal to Pedro for 12 years. I'd die before I betrayed him." "Good," Sophia replied, "because if I find out you're lying, I'll kill you myself." The threat hung in the air between them, and Sophia realized that somewhere in the past month, she'd become someone capable of meaning it. Tommy smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, I wouldn't expect anything less from Pedro's woman." As Tommy left, Sophia knew she was walking a razor's edge between multiple enemies, all of whom wanted to use her for their own purposes. The FBI, Tommy, whoever Tommy was really working for, they all saw her as a pawn in a larger game. But Sophia was done being anyone's pawn. It was time to start playing her own game by her own rules. The question was whether she could survive long enough to win. V10. The revelation came 3 days later in the most unexpected way possible. Sophia was reviewing security footage from the night Pedro was arrested, looking for any clue about who might have tipped off the FBI, when she noticed something strange. In the timestamp corner of the video, she could see Tommy leaving Pedro's office at 11:47 p.m., 20 minutes after Pedro had received the phone call that sent him rushing to the construction site where he was arrested. But Tommy had claimed he'd learned about the arrest the next morning, along with everyone else. Sophia's hands shook as she cross-referenced the footage with phone records she'd accessed using Pedro's security codes. Tommy had made a call at 11:52 p.m. to a number that belonged to a federal task force office. The man she'd trusted with her life, the man who'd guided her through every decision, was indeed a federal informant. But as Sophia dug deeper into the records, she discovered something far worse. Tommy wasn't just feeding information to the FBI. He was playing multiple sides against each other, orchestrating events to serve an agenda she was only beginning to understand. Call records showed contact with FBI agents, but also with Angelo Torino, with offshore accounts tied to international crime syndicates, and most shocking of all, with a private number registered to Vincent Torino. Tommy had been manipulating everyone, Pedro, Sophia, the FBI, even the Torinos, for someone else's benefit. Sophia's phone buzzed with a text message. "Meet me at the old pier. Midnight. Come alone. Time for truth. P. Pedro." Somehow, impossibly, Pedro was free and wanted to meet. Sophia's heart raced as she prepared to leave. She dressed in dark clothes, checked the gun Pedro had taught her to use, and left the penthouse without telling anyone where she was going. The old pier was the abandoned fishing dock outside the city, a place where Pedro had taken her early in their relationship to show her the desert stars away from Vegas's neon glare. Now it felt ominous, shadowy, perfect for secrets and revelations. Pedro was waiting by the water, but something was wrong. He looked older, thinner, and there was a tension in his posture that made Sophia's instincts scream danger. "Pedro," Sophia called softly as she approached. He turned, and Sophia saw exhaustion and something like betrayal in his blue eyes. "Hello, Sophia, you look different. You're supposed to be in federal custody." "Supposed to be, yes, but it turns out my case was dismissed this afternoon. All charges dropped, all evidence ruled inadmissible." Pedro stepped closer, and Sophia noticed he was wearing clothes she'd never seen before. Cheap jeans and a plain t-shirt instead of his usual expensive suits. "Funny thing about evidence being inadmissible. It usually means someone with serious power wanted me free." Sophia felt cold dread pooling in her stomach. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that everything that's happened, my arrest, your takeover of the organization, the war with the Torinos, even your fight with Vincent, it was all orchestrated, all planned by someone who needed me out of the way temporarily while they repositioned the pieces on their chessboard." "Who?" "That's what I'm here to find out." Pedro's voice was hard, dangerous. "Tell me about Tommy, Sophia. Tell me about the decisions he's been helping you make." Sophia's mind raced. "Pedro, Tommy's been playing you, playing all of us. The question is, how much did you know?" The accusation hit Sophia like a physical blow. "What? Pedro, you can't possibly think I think you're either the most innocent victim in this whole mess, or you're the best actress I've ever met." Pedro pulled out his phone and showed her a series of photos. These were taken 3 days ago, you meeting with FBI agent Sarah Chen, having a very cozy conversation. Sophia's blood turned to ice. "Pedro, it's not what you think. She approached me, said Tommy was an informant. And you believed her, instead of coming to me? You were in federal custody. I couldn't exactly visit you in prison. You could have waited. You could have trusted me to handle it when I got out." Pedro's voice was getting harder, more controlled. "Instead, you took over my organization and started making deals with federal agents. I was trying to protect what you built. Were you? Or were you following a script someone else wrote for you?" Before Sophia could respond, footsteps echoed across the pier. Tommy emerged from the shadows, but he wasn't alone. 6 armed men spread out behind him, cutting off any escape route. "Well, this is touching," Tommy said, his voice completely different now, colder, more educated, carrying an authority Sophia had never heard before. "The 2 lovebirds finally reunited." "Tommy," Pedro said quietly, "I should have seen it years ago. Should have, but didn't. You were always too trusting, Pedro, too willing to believe that loyalty could be bought with kindness and respect." Tommy smiled, and it was nothing like the warm expression Sophia remembered. "So you never understood that some people serve bigger purposes than crime family politics. Who are you working for?" Sophia demanded, her hand moving slowly toward her weapon. I wouldn't, Tommy advised, nodding toward his men. And to answer your question, I work for people who understand that organized crime is just another form of business. Resource management, territory control, profit maximization, the same principles that run corporations, just with more direct methods of conflict resolution. International crime syndicate, Pedro realized. You've been positioning my organization to be absorbed into something larger. Very good. And Sophia here was the perfect puppet to manage the transition. Young, inexperienced, dependent on guidance from a trusted advisor. Tommy's eyes glittered with satisfaction. She made every decision I suggested, followed every piece of advice I gave her, even agreeing to meet with the FBI when I leaked her activities to them. Sophia felt sick. You set me up. Everything you told me to do was designed to make you look like the real power behind Pedro's organization. When the federal case against him collapsed, you'd be left holding all the evidence, all the responsibility. Tommy shrugged. A clean transition of blame and ownership. And Pedro? Pedro was supposed to disappear permanently once he was released. A tragic accident, maybe a revenge killing by the Torinos. These things happen in organized crime. Pedro's laugh was cold and dangerous, except I figured it out. Took me a while, but solitary confinement gives you time to think, time to realize that too many coincidences meant someone was orchestrating events. Which brings us to tonight's climax, Tommy said pleasantly. 2 tragic deaths on an abandoned pier. The crime boss and his ambitious girlfriend, killed by persons unknown, probably rival gang members. Very sad. Sophia realized they'd walked into a trap, but she also realized something else. Tommy had made a critical mistake. He'd assumed she was still the naive shopgirl who needed guidance for every decision, but Sophia had learned from the best teacher possible. She'd learned from Pedro. Tommy, Sophia said quietly, you forgot something important. What's that, sweetheart? Pedro taught me that in this business, you always have a backup plan. Sophia pressed the small device in her pocket, and suddenly the pier was flooded with light as FBI agents swarmed from hidden positions. Tommy Marconi, you're under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, and about 15 other federal charges, Agent Chen announced, her weapon trained on Tommy's men. Drop your weapons now. Tommy's expression shifted from satisfaction to fury to resignation in the space of seconds. You clever little bitch. You were working with them all along. Only after I figured out you were working against us, Sophia replied. Chen was right about one thing. You needed to lead us to whoever's really pulling the strings. Thanks for the confession. As Tommy and his men were arrested, Pedro moved to Sophia's side. How long have you known? 3 days. The security footage showed you leaving your office after the call that led to your arrest, but you'd claimed you didn't know until morning. Sophia looked up at him, seeing pride and love replacing the suspicion in his eyes. I couldn't be sure until tonight, so I needed him to reveal his real agenda. And the FBI? Insurance policy. Chen's been watching Tommy for months, but she needed evidence of his real connections. I gave her the bait, he took it, and now they can trace his contacts all the way up the chain. Pedro smiled, and Sophia felt her knees go weak with relief. You learned well. I had a good teacher. So what happens now? Pedro asked as they watched the FBI process the scene. Now we rebuild, carefully, legitimately, without federal informants or international puppet masters. Sophia took his hand, intertwining their fingers. Unless you'd prefer to retire from the crime business entirely. Pedro considered this seriously. The legitimate businesses are profitable enough to support us, and I have to admit, the idea of a quiet life with you has its appeal. Just quiet. Well, perhaps not too quiet. Pedro pulled her closer, and Sophia felt safe for the first time in weeks. After all, I fell in love with a woman brave enough to fight for what she believes in. I wouldn't want you to get bored. As they walked away from the pier together, Sophia realized that she'd found something more valuable than Pedro's empire or the FBI's protection. She'd found herself, strong enough to stand beside a dangerous man, smart enough to outmaneuver his enemies, and brave enough to fight for their future. The game was over, but their story was just beginning. 11. 6 months later, Sophia stood in the kitchen of their new home in the hills outside Las Vegas, preparing breakfast, while Pedro read financial reports at the dining table. The house was smaller than his old penthouse but felt more like home, surrounded by desert landscape and blessed silence instead of city noise and constant danger. The restaurant chain is showing 20% growth this quarter, Pedro announced, looking up from his papers. and the construction company just secured that contract for the new hospital complex. All legitimate? Sophia asked with a smile, bringing him coffee. Completely legitimate. Amazing how much easier business is when you're not constantly looking over your shoulder for federal agents or rival crime families. 6 months ago, Pedro had made good on his promise to go legitimate. With Tommy's arrest and the dismantling of the international crime syndicate he'd been serving, Pedro had liquidated his illegal operations and invested everything in legal businesses. The transition hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. "Any word from Danny or Frank?" Sophia asked. "Danny's running security for a casino in Atlantic City. Frank's moved his family to Phoenix and opened a restaurant. Everyone found their footing eventually." Sophia nodded, pleased that Pedro's former lieutenants had also chosen legitimate paths. The criminal empire was truly dead, replaced by something cleaner and safer. "Speaking of Phoenix," Sophia continued, "my mother called this morning. Her latest scans are completely clear. The doctors are officially calling her cured." Pedro set down his papers and pulled Sophia onto his lap. "That's the best news I've heard all week. She wants to meet you properly. I've told her we're engaged, but she doesn't know about the other stuff." "What did you tell her about my business?" "That you're a successful entrepreneur who swept me off my feet." Sophia laughed. "It's not technically a lie anymore." Pedro kissed her softly. "When do we meet the future mother-in-law?" "Next weekend." "And Pedro? She's going to love you. The real you, not the dangerous version." As if summoned by their conversation, Sophia's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and frowned. "It's Agent Chen. I thought we were done with all that." "Answer it," Pedro suggested. "Better to know what the FBI wants than to wonder." "Sophia, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Chen's voice was carefully neutral. "I have some news you and Pedro should hear." "What kind of news?" "The kind best delivered in person. Can you meet me this afternoon? Both of you?" 3 hours later, Sophia and Pedro sat in Chen's office, surrounded by the institutional grey of federal bureaucracy. Chen looked tired but satisfied, like someone who'd finally solved a complex puzzle. "First, the good news," Chen began. "The international syndicate Tommy was working for has been completely dismantled. Arrests in 12 countries, assets seized, operations shut down permanently." "And the bad news?" Pedro asked. "There is no bad news. I called you here to officially inform you that the FBI considers both of you fully cooperative witnesses who helped us solve a major international case. Your records are clean, your businesses are legitimate, and you're free to live your lives without federal oversight." Sophia felt relief wash over her. "So it's really over?" "It's really over, but there's something else." Chen smiled, an expression Sophia had never seen on the agent's face before. "The Bureau is offering Pedro a consulting position. Help us understand organized crime from the inside. To assist with training programs for agents working complex cases." Pedro was quiet for a long moment. "Why would you want my help?" "Because you understand something most agents don't. The difference between criminals who are evil and criminals who are practical. The syndicate Tommy worked for was evil. Your organization, for all its illegal activities, provided structure and protection in a chaotic world." Chen leaned forward. "We need people who understand those distinctions. I'd be working for the federal government. You'd be working to prevent people like Tommy from manipulating legitimate crime families into international terrorism networks. Think of it as community service with a very specific skill set." Sophia looked at Pedro, seeing him consider this unexpected opportunity. "What do you think?" "I think it would be interesting work. Meaningful work." Pedro turned to Chen. "What would it involve?" "Consulting on cases, training agents, training. Maybe some undercover work if you're willing. All legal, all sanctioned, all designed to prevent the kind of manipulation you experienced." After Chen explained the details, Sophia and Pedro drove home in thoughtful silence. The desert sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, and Sophia felt a deep contentment settle in her chest. "How you want to take the job," she observed. "I think I do. It would let me use my experience for something constructive instead of destructive." Pedro glanced at her. "But only if you're comfortable with it. I won't risk our life together for any job. I think you should do it. You've spent 20 years building an empire based on controlled violence. Maybe it's time to use that knowledge to prevent uncontrolled violence." That evening, as they sat on their patio watching the lights of Las Vegas twinkle in the distance, Sophia reflected on how completely her life had changed. A year ago, She'd been a struggling retail worker sending money to her sick mother. Now she was engaged to a former crime boss turned federal consultant, running legitimate businesses and planning a wedding. "Any regrets?" Pedro asked quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "About falling in love with a dangerous man? About taking over a criminal organization? About fighting Vincent Torino in a warehouse?" Sophia considered seriously. "No, none of it. Even the violence, the moral compromises? Especially those. They taught me who I really am underneath all the fears and limitations I'd placed on myself." Sophia turned to face him. "I learned I'm brave enough to fight for what I love, smart enough to outthink people who underestimate me, and strong enough to build a life on my own terms." Pedro smiled. "And what terms are those? Love without limits, trust without reservation, a partnership between equals who've seen each other at their worst and chosen to stay anyway." "I can live with those terms," Pedro said, pulling her close. As they kissed under the desert stars, Sophia knew their story had found its perfect ending. Not with conquest or revenge or dramatic gestures, but with two people who'd survived everything the world could throw at them and chosen to build something beautiful together. The girl who'd once been afraid to walk alone at night was gone, replaced by a woman who could face any challenge with confidence. The crime boss who'd ruled through fear and violence was gone, replaced by a man who'd learned that true power came from love and legitimate purpose. Together, they were something entirely new and entirely theirs. 12. 2 years later, Sophia stood in the bridal suite of the Four Seasons, adjusting her wedding dress while her mother fussed with the veil. The dress was elegant but simple, ivory silk that made her skin glow, with delicate beadwork that caught the light as she moved. "You look absolutely radiant, sweetheart," her mother said, tears threatening to spill over. "I can't believe my little girl is marrying such a wonderful man." Sophia smiled, still amazed by how completely Pedro had charmed her mother during their first meeting. He'd been the perfect gentleman, attentive, respectful, clearly devoted to Sophia's happiness. Her mother had no idea she was marrying a former Mafia boss, and Sophia intended to keep it that way. "He makes me happy, Mom, really, truly happy. It shows. You've grown so confident, so strong. I barely recognized the worried girl who was working herself to death in that boutique." A knock at the door interrupted them. "Sophia, it's Chen. Can I come in?" Agent Chen, now simply Sarah, since their professional relationship had evolved into an unlikely friendship, entered wearing an elegant navy dress instead of her usual federal agent attire. "The photographer wants a few more shots before the ceremony," Sarah announced, "and I have something for you." She handed Sophia a small, wrapped box. "A wedding gift from all of us at the Bureau." Sophia opened it to find a beautiful silver bracelet with a small charm in the shape of a desert flower. "Sarah, it's gorgeous." "It's also a GPS tracker," Sarah said with a grin. "Just kidding, but Pedro's new colleagues wanted you to know how much they appreciate having him on the team." Over the past 2 years, Pedro had become one of the FBI's most valuable consultants, helping to identify and dismantle 3 major international crime operations. His insights into criminal psychology and organizational structure had proven invaluable, and he'd found genuine satisfaction in using his dark knowledge for legitimate purposes. "How's he holding up?" Sophia asked. Pedro had been uncharacteristically nervous about the wedding, worried that he didn't deserve the happiness they'd found together. "Like a man about to marry the love of his life," Sarah replied. "Also like a man terrified he's going to mess it up somehow." Sophia laughed. Even 2 years later, Pedro still occasionally struggled with believing he deserved a normal, happy life, but Sophia had made it her mission to convince him otherwise, one day at a time. "All right, ladies," the wedding coordinator announced, appearing in the doorway. "It's time." 20 minutes later, Sophia stood at the back of the chapel, her arm linked through her mother's. The space was intimate, only 50 guests, mostly Pedro's former associates who'd gone legitimate, and Sophia's family from Phoenix. No federal agents except Sarah, no media, no unnecessary attention. At the altar, Pedro waited in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, looking more handsome than any man had a right to. When their eyes met, his nervous expression transformed into pure joy, and Sophia felt her heart skip several beats. The music began, and Sophia walked down the aisle toward her future. As she passed the guests, she saw Danny in the 3rd row, looking proud and emotional. Frank sat nearby with his wife and children, beaming. Even Angelo Torino was there. The old Don had become an unexpected ally once Pedro went legitimate, respecting the difficult choice to leave the criminal world behind. Vincent was notably absent, having been arrested 6 months earlier for attempting to rebuild his father's criminal empire. Some people, Sophia reflected, never learned that times had changed. When Sophia reached the altar, Pedro took her hands and whispered, "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "You clean up pretty well yourself," Sophia whispered back, making him laugh. The ceremony was traditional but personal, with vows they'd written themselves. When it came time for Pedro to speak, his voice was steady and clear. "Sophia, you saved my life in every way a person can be saved. You saw past the darkness to find something worth loving, and you loved me until I could see it too. I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that love, protecting our happiness, and building a future bright enough to erase the shadows of our past." Sophia's vows were equally heartfelt. "Pedro, you taught me that I was stronger than I ever imagined, braver than I ever believed, and capable of love deeper than I thought possible. You didn't just rescue me from those men outside the boutique. You rescued me from a life of settling for less than I deserved. I promise to stand beside you through everything, to challenge you when you need challenging, and to love you exactly as you are." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Pedro kissed Sophia with a passion that made the guests cheer and Sophia's knees go weak. As they walked back down the aisle together, rice and flower petals raining down around them, Sophia felt complete in a way she'd never experienced before. The reception was held at Pedro's, now their restaurant, with food prepared by Frank's head chef and wine from Pedro's private collection. During dinner, Sophia found herself studying the faces around them. These people had become their chosen family, former criminals and federal agents, broken people who'd found ways to heal, survivors who'd learned to build instead of destroy. "Penny for your thoughts," Pedro murmured in her ear as the dancing began. "Just thinking about how unlikely all this is. 2 years ago, we were different people living in a much darker world. Do you miss any of it? The excitement, the danger?" Sophia considered this seriously. "I miss feeling like we were partners in something bigger than ourselves. But we have that now too, just in a different way. Working together to build legitimate businesses. Working together to prove that people can change. That love can redeem almost anything. That it's never too late to choose a better path." Sophia smiled up at him. "Besides, married life has its own kind of excitement." "Oh, really? Really? For instance, I have some news that might surprise you." Pedro raised an eyebrow. "What kind of news?" "The kind that means we'll be adding another member to our family in about 7 months. Pedro went very still, his blue eyes searching her face. "Sophia, are you telling me—" "I'm pregnant," Sophia confirmed, laughing at his stunned expression. "Surprise!" Pedro swept her off her feet, spinning her around while guests applauded and cheered. When he set her down, there were tears in his eyes. "Are you happy?" Sophia asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Pedro replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Terrified, thrilled, overwhelmed, grateful, but most of all, happy. God, Sophia, a baby, our baby. Are you worried about being a father with your background?" "Terrified," Pedro admitted, "but also determined to be the kind of father who protects through love instead of fear, who builds up instead of tearing down." "You will be. I know you will be." As the evening wound down and their guests began departing with hugs and well-wishes, Sophia and Pedro found themselves alone on the restaurant's patio, looking out at the city where their story had begun. "No regrets?" Pedro asked, echoing a conversation from years earlier. "None," Sophia replied firmly. "Every choice, every risk, every moment of danger led us here, to this marriage, this family we're building, this life we've created together. Even falling in love with a criminal? Especially falling in love with a criminal, because that criminal chose to become something better for love. That criminal taught me I could be something better too." Pedro pulled her close, and Sophia felt the steady beat of his heart against her chest. In the distance, the lights of Las Vegas sparkled like fallen stars, beautiful and bright, but no longer calling to them with promises of easy money and dangerous thrills. They'd found something better than excitement or power, or the rush of living on the edge. They'd found each other, and in finding each other, they'd found peace. "I love you, Mrs. Castellano," Pedro whispered. "I love you too, Mr. Castellano, for always." As they kissed under the desert stars, Sophia knew their greatest adventure was just beginning. Not the adventure of crime and violence and constant danger, but the adventure of building a life together, raising children, growing old, becoming the people they'd always had the potential to be. It was an adventure that would last a lifetime, and Sophia couldn't wait to see where it would take them. The girl who'd once been afraid to walk alone at night had become a woman who could face any future with confidence, as long as she was facing it with the man she loved. And the crime boss who'd once ruled through fear had become a husband and soon-to-be father who'd learned that true power came from love, protection, and the choice to build rather than destroy. Together they were proof that even the darkest stories could have bright endings and that love really could conquer all, even the shadows of the past. Their story was complete, but their life together was just beginning.